Is this thing on? Is it on? Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about the Scourge. We are taking a momentary break from all the expansion news and information, and I wanted to hop back into the live game and talk about some balance changes as of recent. And we're going to be diving deep into the Scourge, or as deep as we can go, because I feel like it's been gutted in some areas, and it's just like, I don't know. I think there were some big swings, big aspirations, and maybe some big misses, but we'll get into all of that in this video. So as we know, many healers in Guild Wars 2 can apply Alacrity, with a lesser amount being able to apply Quickness. There's disparity there, I know. In the effort to bring Alacrity to Scourge, they have chipped away and trimmed many aspects of the Shroud and the Shades and how they function, and also the actual duration of Alacrity is rather poor. So let's talk about first and foremost the Shades. The Shades themselves used to last, I mean, depending on how far we're going back, they used to last 30 seconds, which I absolutely adored. And then they dropped them down to 20 seconds, but now the Shades only last for 8 seconds. The same amount of time that it takes for one shade to recharge itself. So theoretically, you'll always have at least one shade active. That's theoretically, and also in action, you're really only ever gonna have like one shade up at a time. But you never really know if you need to replace another shade if an enemy moves, or if you need to then go target someone else and they're done in this area. So as it is, you can't really set up a nest anymore, as I used to back in the day, because when they had a 20-second duration, you could play around this area a little bit more, spam out your abilities. That one's already gone, that one's gone, and then that one's gone as well. And things like Sand Cascade only are on a 10-second cooldown, so you'd only be able to get one application of Sand Cascade out at any given time. A Nefarious Favor, if you have Alacrity, maybe you can pop this twice. But yeah, it's not my favorite change. It's actually one of my least favorite changes when it comes to Scourge in this patch. I really enjoyed the 30-second duration, but then, of course, when it went live, I really enjoyed the 20-second duration. I think it's nice to have a little bit of play in terms of the setup and the payoff when it comes to area control, which is kind of what the Scourge was always about. And then you can see this larger ring summoning around the shade, and that has to do with the Grandmaster trait. But yeah, that's the very first thing that they did. They reduced the actual duration of the shade. Next, they started to implement some of the barrier into, or Alacrity into the barrier application on the Scourge. And they did this in the form of a Grandmaster, Desert Empowerment. Desert Empowerment used to be a master tier trait, but then they moved it to Grandmaster and baked in some more Alacrity into it. And also updated the way that the barrier actually will spawn on the manifestation of the Sandshade. So now Manifest Sandshade grants a barrier to allies near it in a 300 radius for 5 targets. When you apply barrier, you grant boons to the affected target. So this also includes Sand Cascade, Sand Flare, the updated Serpent Siphon, and I think those are all of your barrier applications. Sand Swell potentially. I tried this out, and I was able to gain Alacrity on this, but I think I tried to take someone else's Sand Swell, and it wasn't actually applying Alacrity to me, unless it was just like a bug and or they didn't have the trait slotted, but neither here nor there. So yes, you're going to be getting Alacrity on your Manifest and also on your other barrier application skills. So as you can see here, there's a bit of a larger ring around it. It's no longer just pulsing in the immediate area. It's a little bit more forgiving in the sense that it's larger than the actual shade, which I actually really enjoy. I think that's a bonus. I think that's a big positive for this ability. And I believe this used to also function to where when you'd have multiple shades up, it would also pulse the barrier in that location. But it seems to, if that was the case, it seems to no longer be doing that. It's just on the most current shade that you manifest. It no longer procs on any existing ones, which I think is logical and makes sense. And I'm actually a proponent of that. However, if you're looking at the tooltip, you'll start to notice some issues. I'm currently, what is my concentration at? So yeah, currently I have 1.5 seconds of Alacrity. And that is pretty low for being at around, 50-60% concentration. Usually baseline alacrities will be like 4 or 5 seconds. They're a little bit forgiving even if you don't have any concentration on your character. But for this character to be investing concentration into the build and to not get any real benefit out of it, it does feel terrible. It feels really, really bad. And I realize that they are trying to keep it relatively low because if you have all of your shades out and you proc Sand Cascade, if you hit 10 targets, or maybe even more, you'll be able to apply Alacrity onto all of those targets. It just doesn't feel good in those niche scenarios with the actual reduction of the shade duration on top of the relatively low Alacrity duration. There's no win. There's no win in any circumstance. It seems like in an effort to implement Alacrity onto this build and onto this profession, this elite specialization, they've sacrificed the entirety of its gameplay experience and gameplay flow, which to me is like wild. I've always believed that, and it seems that Guild Wars 2 has believed it through their profession balance manifesto, that changes should be made in service of a profession's gameplay experience and the feel of that profession. But this change, I don't know if anyone enjoys this. I'm not sure if anyone's like, yeah, let's go on board with 5-second duration shades with absolutely minimal alacrity because we're afraid of having 10 target alacrity. There's no use for the alacrity to be on this profession, on this elite specialization, if it's not actually going to be useful. So I'm really disappointed in the way that they've handled Scourge. I don't understand why it's so terrible and why it has to be so bad. I'm really just going off, and it's like as if I hated all of the changes. And I mean, there are some changes within this that I actually really enjoy. Like, I like the way that Sandstorm Shroud was changed in terms of pulsing out barrier over its channel before the detonation. I will say the detonation effect should be completely changed because it's a core Unholy Feast ability, which has nothing to do with Scourge, and it's kind of misleading. If anything, it should just be that explosive sand swirl around you. So yeah, I like the change to Sandstorm Shroud. Still think it could be changed. Feed from Corruption just isn't really exciting for me. It becomes a very tanky trait, which is another thing that they've changed. When you remove a corrupted boon from an enemy, you gain barrier. There's no real... I don't know, it's like, it's there, I guess. It's very tanky. It has the potential to be very tanky, but I'm not really excited by it. I'd rather this be when you apply barrier to an ally, you heal them for like 200, 300 health. Something a bit more minor, but because you have so much access to barrier, you're able to sustain your allies a bit more. Desert Empowerment, I don't really get it. It could have been baked into something like Sand Savant, where you maintain all 3 of your smaller shades, but make it to where your shade abilities will only ever hit 5 targets. And then it would function as to where creating more shades doesn't increase your target cap, but instead increases your potential of reach for allies instead. I don't know if people would like that either, but I think I would rather have that over, 8-second duration shades and pumping out 0.75 seconds of alacrity. So I'm just more so disappointed in Scourge. Now, there were a couple other changes in regards to Serpent Siphon, which is one of the abilities that I've wanted to see changed for a long time now. The pickup mechanics didn't really make sense for Scourge, but I think there could be a profession around, pickups if they wanted to go a bit more into that. But Serpent Siphon now functions as an area of effect ability where you'll send a serpent to a location to then explode and apply barrier, Aegis, and regen to allies. I just don't know if I like the way that the target is set up. I don't know if I like that it's just an AoE in a location. I think I'd prefer this to be a road AoE, something similar to Lightning Orb, Revenant Hammer 2, Coalescence of Ruin, even Druid Vine Surge with the staff on the 4th ability. I think Serpent Siphon, because it goes out in a straight line, if it passed through allies and then granted barrier, it might be a little bit better because there's a bit of a travel time connected to this ability, and the radius isn't the most forgiving. So I found it sometimes a bit difficult to apply and to get use out of Serpent Siphon in the way that I want to. And on top of that, it applies Aegis, which I don't really understand. You know, it's this every specialization that is support leaning or has an option for support, they should get access to Aegis and stability and these very important boons. And to a certain degree, I don't necessarily agree. That's neither here nor there. I'm just, yeah, Scourge, it's there. I don't know if I have any like real closing thoughts or an idea as to correcting this. Now, they are going to be increasing the baseline alacrity from 1 second to 1.5 seconds, but I don't know if that's even a big enough buff to begin with. I think it should be at least like a baseline of 2.5 seconds, so that you don't feel like you have to keep spamming your Manifest Sandshade. That's one thing that I hoped would be avoided in these newer support patches, was moving away from the constant cycle of spamming a particular ability, be it a profession mechanic or not. Now, I agree that having profession mechanics tied to, you know, applying alacrity and or quickness is maybe a bit more smart, but I also think that you could infuse some of those boons into the actual abilities. Something like Serpent Siphon. Maybe instead of Aegis, this grants 5 or 6 seconds of alacrity, so that you could have a little bit more control over that boon application and not just, oh, well, I'm out of sand shades, or I've used all 3 because I needed to, and to apply that barrier, and then I don't have any more to really put out, and you're starting to stagger behind. Having another option might be helpful and might be useful. By other professions, for an example, is Firebrand. They tend to have a really great time applying their boon, which is Quickness, because their Quickness boon is infused into their trait line, but also infused into their utility skills and elite skill, which is great. It's great. It's like, then I start to wonder, should Ghastly Breach apply alacrity instead of might? Is that an option? Is that a potential? Then infuse a bit more of that might into something like Desiccate, or I mean, we have other options like Blood is Power for the core Necro. So it's not like we're struggling to apply might in an area. We also have traits that do it on barrier application. So, you know, there's some ideas here that there's more skills that could apply alacrity up front. I think they might have gone a little bit too heavy-handed in the direction of forcing all of the boon applications to be on traits and removing them all from skills. They just have to make it to where, you know, your Sandshade can only ever hit 5 targets, no matter if you have all 3 of them up, including yourself. Maybe it's a necessary change in order to appease the greater evil of Quickness and alacrity. The Scourge is one of my favorite healers in Guild Wars 2. It does it in a very interesting way of increasing barrier on allies, shielding them, and then allowing your regen and other vampiric healing abilities to slowly heal up any damage that they've received, having some instances of more bursty healing if you need it, but you are mostly that shielder, and it's a really unique playstyle that is existent in other MMOs, and I'm really happy ever since Path of Fire that they've implemented this. And it kind of leads to another greater discussion of alacrity and quickness in the game. I'm on the boat of, you either fully embrace it and treat it no differently than something like Might, where it's easily accessible and not as much of a headache to bring to the table as it currently is, or get rid of it. And I'm leaning a bit more on the side of get rid of alacrity and quickness. I think that these boons are just a little bit too strong. I'd much rather go back to the days of quickness being a personal effect that would last momentarily on something like Warrior's Berserk utility skill, I think it was, or like one of their stances would increase their attack speed. I'm no longer really fond of quickness and alacrity being these behemoths when it comes to the way that we view the gameplay experience and the balance of Guild Wars 2. I'm so sick and tired of playing the UI. I just want to play the game and find more interesting ways of playing the game, and the way that we fire off skills, the way that skills interact with each other. And it just seems like we can't get out of this Alacrity and Quickness hellhole. And it's maybe even negatively impacting the way that current encounters are designed in terms of the amount of health required for bosses. But this is veering off into a little bit more of a larger discussion when it comes to the way Guild Wars 2 has aged and the way in which tools are granted to players to make it much easier. I really am at a loss. That's my overall review and impressions of the changed Scourge. I would love to hear what you all have to say down below. Do you enjoy these changes? Are you happy that we have Alacrity on the Scourge? I think this has just been a net negative for this profession, because I'm not seeing any Scourges in raids or strike missions applying that Alacrity. It's more so just we're waiting around to see what they're going to think up next. If you are interested in pre-purchasing the new expansion, Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, and or any of the other expansions, I have links down below. Thank you so very much, ArenaNet. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon, you get early access to all of my videos. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye, everyone. Mwah.